Hello and welcome. This is Gabrielle Celeste talking to you today about tips on how to survive your Saturn return. So, Saturn is going into Aries soon, and it's giving us a preview and peekaboo for what we can expect from 2026 until 2028. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because my Saturn return was so impactful for me to do this work. Also, if I haven't already mentioned, I'm the owner of AGUA Astrology, and I am primarily an intuitive astrologer. I co host the Spiritual Sisters podcast with my siblings, and I do a lot of fun things. So be sure to check out the links in below and give it a look. So, Saturn in Aries is the first time we're experiencing this specific transit since 1996. So, Saturn in Aries took place 1996 to 1998. And Saturn takes about 28 to 30 years to make a full orbit around the sun. But Saturn in Aries is a really big deal because he is going to meet up with Neptune in Aries. So Neptune recently just left Pisces, its home sign of Pisces, a couple months ago at time of recording. And Saturn and Neptune don't do well in the sign of Aries. And those that are around the age of 28 to 30, even 27-year-olds are feeling it. 56-year-olds, 58 to 60-year-olds are feeling it. And if you're lucky enough to experience a third Saturn return, about 87, 88 to 90 is usually when you experience the third. Most people only get to their second, and oftentimes people can kind of dip out at the first if their souls decide that it's just not time for them to continue to hang out. But Saturn in Aries is your Saturn return. We'll start with that. Saturn return is your astrological initiation, induction, if you will, into adulthood. And if you're not already on path, your Saturn return is certainly going to put you on path. And it can be one of the most beautiful times of your life or the most challenging time of your life, depending on what you're meant to do. And we're going to get into the ways in which you can work with your personal Saturn return, if that's where you're at. But Saturn is working. So the way that you want to work with Saturn primarily in steps is to identify where Saturn's at in your birth chart. So Saturn's going to fall into a specific constellation: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Pisces, Aquarius, etc., etc. And you want to see which constellation that planet falls into, as well as the house in your specific birth chart. It's in one of the 12 houses that the planet falls into, because then you're going to be able to get an idea of what your Saturn return is going to be about and how to work with your Saturn specifically. So we can go through each one of the houses to get a general idea of what your Saturn return could be or what it could look like. But the most prominent ways I'm going to be talking about, general ways to work with your Saturn return, is, we'll start with general and then we'll go house by house. But so generally speaking, because Saturn's a planet that represents karma, represents lessons, represents tests, it's oftentimes feared and it is a challenge. I don't like to use the word hard, but it is challenging. But doing the work and really honoring what it is that Saturn's asking you to do in that 3-year period certainly pays off. It always pays off, as uncomfortable as it might be in that period of time. So one of the things that I took away from my Saturn return, now looking back in terms of how to work with it, I actually started lifting heavy during my Saturn return. It's almost kind of the idea of like Saturn's weighing down on you because you are going to feel it for that exact 3-year period. And especially when it comes conjunct to your natal Saturn, because Saturn takes a little bit longer to move. So say, for example, your Saturn's at 13 degrees. As it's at 10 degrees of whatever constellation it's in, you're going to be feeling that build up, but you're going to feel or likely to have an exact life-changing moment or life-changing experience or impactful experience when it's exactly conjunct your natal Saturn. And Saturn, when I see exact Saturn returns, so when it's exactly conjunct, I've seen people get married, I've seen people give birth to their first child, I've seen people change their careers entirely, have major identity shifts, and that's exactly what the Saturn returns asking you to do, what it's all about, and the purpose of it too. So First and foremost, working with it after you identify where it's at and what it means for you specifically, and sitting with it and not bypassing any of the challenges or tests that are coming your way throughout that period of time. So, for example, if your Saturn's in the first house, you're probably going to go through major identity changes, up levels, whole new version of self. Second house, I see a lot of money, self worth, scarcity come forth with respect to the Saturn return in the second. Saturn in the third, I see people moving. I see also people become writers, artists. They're using their voice more. It could be impactful for a sibling if they have a sibling. Fourth house Saturn return, oftentimes people also move, but become mothers or have a significant experience with their own mom. Fifth house Saturn return, oftentimes people become very creative, really tap into their creativity and or have children. Sixth house is job change. People get very serious about their health or have some type of health related experience. Seventh house Saturn return typically is marriage or some type of long-term contract. Eighth house Saturn return, getting into the cult, experiencing death in a metaphorical sense or literal, and or dealing with money because it's one of the money houses. A ninth house Saturn return includes traveling, but also maybe completing school, like university, higher forms of education. 10th house Saturn return typically tends to focus on careers and or relationship to the father. 11th house Saturn return is community focused, friendship focused, collective focused. And then 12th house Saturn returns are pretty gnarly. It could also be a cult focused Saturn return, maybe stepping into the work of spirituality, becoming spiritual, and coming back to true purpose that involves a higher purpose, if that's what you're meant to do in this lifetime. So it's a true calling, much like the 10th house. And Saturn in Aries, because Saturn is exalted in the sign of Libra, he doesn't do well in the sign of Aries. And the upside of Saturn in Aries is that Saturn is tests, lessons, and Aries is the forefront of any enterprise, beginnings. And so we're going to see lots of endings, beginnings, shifting. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this is happening and we're getting a taste of it. So Saturn goes into Aries for the first time since 1998 on May 24th. And he retrogrades back into Pisces to finish up his story arc then, and on September 1st of 2025. And then in 2026 until 2028, Saturn is going to be in Aries. And so the fact that Saturn is giving us that peekaboo moment in the summer of 2025 in a year 9 in numerology, I don't think is a coincidence because, again, it's leaning into that endings, beginnings energy in that forefront. And so it'll be really interesting to see what happens, especially when it comes to businesses. Aries rules over firearms, so maybe new gun laws could be coming up. Children are also, it's a Leo and Aries thing, but the inner child, but like it's more for like the forefront of like innovation, the first, new beginnings. That's a lot of Aries energy. So I'd be curious if that's involved in some way, or if those themes come up in any way. And so survival tips, I would say, are to sit with it, to identify what's coming up for you at this time. Try not to bypass it because there's lessons in all of it, and the up level is so worth it on the other side. And it's you're being put on path for what you're supposed to do during a Saturn return. So I hope that was helpful. Would love to know what you have going on for Saturn and Aries, and or what you are expecting for this next Saturn shift, where it's at in your chart, and how you are already feeling that it could be affecting you, or what you maybe anticipate. And I'll catch you in the next one.